I can't. Oh man,
Hey, Dan, you're
yeah.
looking kind of down.
Uh, yeah. Like to tell you the truth, I'm sad because this is our last episode before taking the summer off. I mean, like who am I going to talk politics with for 2 months?
You could always call me.
Oh man, you're never in town, and like even now you're on Zoom again, and if and I don't even know where you are. So look, I can't afford the long distance. We'll just have to touch base in the fall.
Okay. I get it. But look at it this way. After this August, we got a huge fall coming up. There's Manitoba election, federal minority parliament. They could call an election any minute. There's even a U.S. presidential election on the horizon. It's like every holiday, birthday, and Halloween for you all rolled into one.
Oh yeah, like you've got a point there. There's enough there. We could do like 5 episodes a week when we come back.
Hold on there.
Yeah, we'll never have to write a column again. We could just do this full time. I'll tell editor Paul Simin, and we'll start booking our guests
I
now.
did.
And
Hold on. I didn't mean.
heads up, politicians and pundits, Niigaan and the Lone Ranger,
I just.
away!
I just meant we'll never run out of things to talk about. Just because we can doesn't mean we should. Dan, Dan.
The Winnipeg Free Press proudly presents, in partnership with CJNU 93.7 FM, Niigaan and the Lone Ranger. Here are your hosts, Niigaan Sinclair and Dan the Lone Ranger Lett.
Here we are for our final episode in season 1 of Niigaan and the Lone Ranger. Dan, how do you feel?
Well, if I don't worry too much about what my bosses think of this, and I think we've done pretty well. If it's like a lot of things. If you worry too much about whether the people that you work for get it, if they understand what you're doing, then it can drive you nuts. And I do, no, that having been said, I think they do understand what we're doing. And honestly, I'm very proud of the lineup
We've
that
done
we pulled
quite a
together.
year. We've done quite a year in recording. We've taken this little podcast, which has been mostly centered around Manitoba elections and Manitoba politics, and we've kind of opened it up slightly, and I think it's been good for the paper. It's been good for, I think, the community, and I've had people who have said, come up to me and said, "Hey, I listen every week." And these are people who otherwise I would never interact with politically, or people who otherwise may not have had access to the paper even. So I think that's good. I think we're driving people to the paper. We're also showing that Manitoba is a pretty interesting place. And our listenership from our analytics seems to be that we have people listening from all across the
Mhm.
United States and even a few overseas.
We remain huge in Hawaii.
We
you know,
obviously have some unknown relatives over there or something.
snowbirds, yes, that are no. I mean, I think it's an interesting experience. I do think certainly we've gotten a lot of traction with people in politics. We've had several provincial cabinet ministers. We've had a couple of federal cabinet ministers. We've had federal party leaders, Elizabeth May, and today, Jagmeet Singh will join us, and fascinating conversation, very interesting guy. And but that reminds me, I do want to talk about the people who are dodging us, the people who won't do the podcast. So it starts with Pierre Polyev,
It,
which is, and I've had like back and forth with his people, and and I will continue to try and lure is the wrong word, and I don't, and yeah, definitely not lure, not groom. No, that's not the right word either. But I
uh,
do, yeah, we do. I think we do want to hear from him. I did try to get Maxime Bernier prior to the by-election vote, And then after the by-election vote, I don't want to talk to Maxime Bernier. I just,
And of course, we send out to the Prime Minister,
Yeah.
on the podcast. The number one way to convince people to come on the podcast is call them out for not responding to us. That's probably...
It's, with our enormous audience, we'll crowdfund a campaign of harassment.
Watch out, everybody.
And it should say, and I'm hoping this will change in the fall when the provincial election campaign is on. That also, we have talked to NDP leader Wab-Kinew. We're probably remiss in not talking to Liberal leader Dugal-Lamont, but we're going to fix that very quickly when we come back, I think.
Absolutely. And he's expressed interest to want to be on the podcast too.
And and then there's the Premier, Heather Stephenson. Again, I've sort of taken a run at it 2 or 3 times. And the good news is that once an election campaign starts, for the most part, all the politicians who, think you're crazy and ignore you, all of a sudden they're your best friends. I don't know what it is.
I think that's just a coincidence. That's just a coincidence.
Just a coincidence.
Getting to the news for this week, we wanted to cover. There's our colleague Danielle De Silva at the Free Press has been working hard to bring attention to a story that came out and has not just the headline itself, but there's little facts within this story that I think are important. And of course, it's that we are at the highest in about 13 years or so. We're at the highest amount of adults and youth in the provincial jails. And this comes at the heels of a pretty aggressive campaign by the provincial government in Manitoba to get repeat offenders off the street, to target particular areas around violent crime. We've had Justice Minister Kelvin Gertson on the podcast. One of the facts that came out of that reporting that people might not be aware of is that the Winnipeg Police Service has been compiling data from 2022, which, as we know, was the kind of coming out of the pandemic time. And it's turned out that the city had the worst year ever for violent crime, or one of the worst years ever. There was drastic increases in property and violent offenses, drug traffic and other offenses,
homicides.
Homicides. And then, of course, the deadliest year on record with 53 homicides. I was doing some very minor reporting, and I say minor meaning that I don't have any analytics for this, but that was provincially, there was the most amount of Indigenous homicides in 2022 too. And so, this is really notable because not only seeing an aggressive provincial government, but we're also seeing a community coming out of the pandemic. And of course, with our higher Indigenous population, this massive amount of incarceration taking place.
Yeah, the incarceration levels are a pretty good barometer of a number of things that are happening in society. It's not just crime itself. Crime is driven by poverty, by mental health problems and addictions. And right now, we have an epidemic of substance abuse and addictions. It's driving a lot of crime. It's also important to know too that there does seem to be evidence that this is a result of the police being more active in arresting and charging people. 75% of the increased adult population, and that's over 2,000 adults in custody in jails. They are there on remand, awaiting the disposition of their cases. So this, it's all of these things. It's no one thing, but it's an insight into some problems that we have in society. And the only other thing we know too is the more people you incarcerate, ultimately, the more people you are schooling in the fine art of how to get incarcerated. It's not to make excuses for people who commit crimes, but that's the social phenomena, the kind of dynamic that comes with this.
Do you remember during, at the very opening days of 2022, those people who are not in Manitoba or watching Manitoba or city politics, But you remember it was January 2022, very early. I think it was the 5th or something like that. Chief Danny Smythe, Winnipeg police chief, comes out and declares a state of emergency, and had said that they had not enough officers coming out of the pandemic then to deal with the emergency situations. And there were days over the Christmas weeks, just before that, that they couldn't respond. And this seems to be almost an addressing of that, or some kind of way in which there's I find that that there's this kind of weird yin and yang with policing in the province, that if they were short, and the answer is an aggressive provincial government, which then results in more incarceration. I don't know. There's lots of dots that are happening in Winnipeg that seem to be connecting.
Yeah, this is not it should be noted, this is not a phenomena unique to Winnipeg. Cities all over the continent, all over the world, are experiencing increases in violent crime. It definitely is a byproduct or a consequence of the pandemic, although exactly how the pandemic itself and the restrictions that were in place in many countries around the world, and just the experience, all the death and suffering that came with the pandemic, it's not entirely clear what the cause and effect is. But definitely, we know more people are abusing substances, more people are addicted, overdoses are higher, crime related to drugs is definitely up. And we're sort of at a watershed. It's interesting that we have a provincial election campaign this fall, because it'll be like, my experience has been that even the most progressive or enlightened political leaders begin to talk about putting more boots on the street and more policing to address higher levels of crime, even when they know that really what we need we need more psychiatric nurses. We need
mental health.
We need more. Like there is a program where police officers and mental health workers are responding together to to instances, a lot of them involving people who are having a really bad reaction to a drug, usually meth, to stop it from becoming a criminal matter, to get them into the healthcare system where I know that there's great work being done by the fire and paramedic service in Winnipeg. They've got community paramedics working at shelters and facilities downtown to try and ease the number of people that are being taken in some sort of a health or mental health crisis to ER. So there are steps, but oh my God, it seems like we spend pennies on those really progressive things, and dollars, huge amount of dollars, on just hiring more police officers.
Yeah, and the fact is that for community safety patrol, we've been talking about the downtown community safety patrol, we're talking about the Bear Clan, the Mama Bear Clan, all these community groups. You could fund those groups with just a few officers, but then you get into the words defunding or reallocating justice money or police money, and then people's back gets all up. I hope that this comes up during the provincial election, because having patrolled downtown weekly for about 5 years now, with a community-based group, absolutely, over those 5 years, it's been just a radical increase of encampments, needle pickup that we've been doing, just in some weeks, just radical. You can actually tell when certain times of the month, when there's more money on the streets, and then you'll see the spike in drug use, needles left around and so on. And then, of course, the lack of mental health services, and the fact that the worst people to respond to people who are in crisis are often police. They can't handle their direct way that they deal with these things, not because they're bad people, but because they're not trained in this way, is just immediately to jail, or immediately to even some of the major shelter projects, which are not appropriate for particularly Indigenous peoples in the streets, who need, frankly, a smudge. They need some love. They need a lot of care and empathy. And taking them to a shelter that oftentimes won't be that place. I mean, we've been really fundamental in helping start that shelter Indigenous run center on Disraeli Freeway, and that's been a radical decision, or sorry, a radical solution for dealing with a very radical problem.
Yeah, I think that you mentioned compassion and empathy, and I recently wrote a couple of columns about what I thought was disingenuous or selective empathy and compassion on the part of political leaders. The provincial government's continuing refusal to examine harm reduction, supervised consumption for addicts as part of a larger strategy to deal with addictions and mental health problems. Also wrote about Councillor Jeff Brawadi's zombies comment, like referring to the people suffering from addictions and mental health downtown, referring to them as zombies. And and this is where, like, there are a lot of good things that come out of elections. Like, it forces parties and leaders to focus, provide real solutions, and we can make quantum leaps forward in addressing the pressing issues of society. Unfortunately, I don't think this is one that will benefit from the election, because it seems like the majority of people who vote think that addiction is not a disease, that mental health is not, those are not like diseases. These are people who don't have the intestinal fortitude and resilience to kind of live better lives. I hear from these people all the time when I write about these subjects. And boy, they really don't like to be told that they lack compassion. No. No, I know. Some of their best friends are compassionate, like, what can I say?
Also, this provincial election will be in so many ways about Winnipeg versus the rural areas, and it'll be set up in that way. And I think justice will be that wedge issue between the rural areas, which of course are all immune to crime and drug use and encampments. That's a sarcasm, by
yeah, that's right. I'm just making a note now. Must travel with Niigaan more outside the city. Yeah, just a second. I've got that written down.
And then, of course, the city, which is this, will be characterized in different ways, and I think it will be characterized by this issue around justice. But that's for the fall. We'll pick up again on that topic. Let's talk about today's feature interview. We are so lucky that Dan, speaking of boots on pavement, you've been working very hard with the staff of Jagmeet Singh to come and join the pod and come on the trail with Niigaan and the Lone Ranger. And we had an opportunity to not just spend some time with Jagmeet from visiting relatives in Ontario, but we took more time than allotted.
Yeah. Well, and that's always a good sign. It's, if you get 30 minutes, and as I note in the podcast, if you can, presto changeo, abracadabra, if you can turn 30 minutes into 47 minutes, then you're onto something good. I think it's an interesting time in Canadian political history to talk to Jagmeet Singh, because he is the power behind the throne right now. Like, he is the leader, and the NDP are the party, for better for worse, that are keeping the balance of power in favor of the minority mandate Liberals in the House of Commons. And again, it's, all of this stuff is worthy for debate, but when you look at what they have collaborated on with the Liberals and the end results of it, it's hard for me to say. Like, people will talk about whether the supply and confidence motion or deal that they have with the Liberals is good for, Jagmeet Singh, good for the NDP. I think it's been good for the country to a certain extent.
We talk about that, and one of I think the coolest things about this interview is, while sometimes you can get a lot of talking points from a federal politician, we get a little glimpse behind some of the curtains at Parliament, and I think that's interesting. There's if you listen to this interview, you'll get lots of insight on what's happening there, how are their debates taking place, and then also what does Jagmeet Singh think about going forward? What is the supply and confidence? And so without any further ado, let's go to our feature interview with federal NDP leader Jagmeet Singh.
Coming to us from Brampton, Ontario, where he's visiting family, but really on the tail end of, and correct me if I'm wrong, you guys have you're killing it on the frequent flyer side, like lots of points in the last month or so with the way you've been traveling.
Yeah, definitely. We've been flying around a lot of the country, which is par for the course, and normally try to get around the country as much as I can. So lots of miles being racked up, lots of kilometers being racked up for sure.
And it's not, I mean, we don't, I guess you never know in a minority parliament, we don't have an election for sure in the immediate future, but I suppose that summertime is almost an election, sort of cadence, like the way you travel and try to get to meet as many people as possible.
Definitely, we use every summer as an opportunity to meet as many people as possible. And in a minority government, that becomes a little bit more, there's a little bit more pressure on trying to maximize that outreach, because I want to speak to as many people as possible, hear their concerns, and make sure that we're fighting for things that matter to them. So I spend as much time as possible in the summer as trying to meet people.
So, I mean, the first question we wanted to ask you, I guess, is like the question that everybody asks you, but I'm actually I'm gonna let Niigaan ask the first serious question, and I'm gonna ask you a less than serious question, which is: are you aware and are you comfortable with the fact that you have become a meme in the upcoming Manitoba election? You now appear on election pre-writ advertising here in Manitoba. Were you aware of that?
I actually was in Manitoba not too long ago, and I saw one of the ads on a billboard. So I have seen the beginning of this ad campaign.
So, and for listeners, this is a third-party ad taken out by a somewhat shadowy organization, where there's lots of like dripping red icons and flames and other alarming imagery that has a picture of you and provincial NDP leader Rob Canoe and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau together as some sort of unholy sort of trio. Do you understand the point that they're trying to make in this? Like, does it make any sense at all to you?
I don't get it personally. All I know is that we've got for thousands of Manitobans, we got dental care for kids, for seniors, and for people who need it. It's going to make a big difference in their lives. And we've been fighting to get people a break, get people some relief in this really difficult time, and achieve that, while the Conservatives and the Bloc, the other opposition parties, haven't been able to point to any concrete change they've made in people's lives. We can show materially we've got people money in their pocket with an increased GST rebate known as a grocery rebate. We got money in people's pockets by helping them with their kids' dental care needs. And soon, as seniors in our country who earn less than $70,000, which is a significant portion of them, will be able to have free dental care. So they'll go into their dentist's office, their hygienist, and their dental care bills will be covered with the federal program. So we're helping people in a real way, and we're holding government to account. We forced this government to remove the special rapporteur through votes in Parliament. We've been pushing for a public inquiry into foreign interference, and now the government's moving forward with some early signs of a public inquiry. So we've shown we can be an opposition party and get things done. And so I don't really get the point of that ad. We're just fighting for people. That's our goal.
It's great to see you, Jagmeet. We have this kind of weird politics in Manitoba of really a two-party system that kind of has a third, but really the two parties, of course, are NDP and the Conservatives. It's interesting to kind of collapse the federal Liberals in with the federal NDP and the provincial NDP. and then sort of cake it in orange. But it's hard not also to see that there's sort of a use of orange in Manitoba. If we were all together in one room, we were all virtual right now, but I have this wonderful picture that I've saved of you in this really gorgeous orange ribbon shirt, obviously at a powwow ground somewhere. And, there's, when you talk about Manitoba politics and you talk about orange, you can't avoid talking about Indigenous peoples. And I think there's kind of this interesting moment in Canadian politics where we've got a very visible person such as yourself, who's a federal NDP leader, Wab Kinew, who we've had on the podcast before, one of the very first First Nations party leaders in the country. Do you think that there's sometimes some racialized messaging in this?
There's no doubt that there are people that will try to use the differences that myself or Wab have, that we look different, that we come from a culture or a background that is not what you normally expect of a leader of a party, and use that to exploit that and make people feel maybe uncertain or uneasy because of that. So that's something that certain people will use as a tactic. It's been done before us, and it will be probably attempted after us. Our goal is to say, I think, look at what we're doing. What is the Manitoba NDP doing? Or fighting for healthcare to make sure people have the best quality healthcare possible. And they're fighting for healthcare because the current Conservative government has been cutting healthcare, making it harder for people to get access to emergency room services, or getting in to meet your doctor, or to get the care that you need. They're fighting for more affordability because they're seeing that the Conservatives aren't taking affordability seriously and are allowing the really rich to continue to be fine, and they're handing out lots of money to billionaires, but they're not really responding to the needs of everyday families. They're saying, hey, we're up against a high cost of groceries, high cost of our mortgage, high cost of our rent. What's going on? And so they're the real substance to what's going on. I think people should pay attention. New Democrats, both provincially and federally, are really fighting to get people the help they need, give them a break, give them some relief, and we're up against Conservatives and Liberals who aren't really making that a priority.
There's lots there that we want to get into, especially when we talk about groceries and pricing, and but I think what everybody wants to talk about, which is important to identify, which is that this Canadian federal minority parliament is such a different one, in that it's got this supply and confidence deal, which has carried the government quite forward, and that the NDP has been instrumental of including many of the things you talked about, the childcare and so on. But many people have also said that the supply and confidence deal may cost some support for your party, the NDP. Which party do you think is going to benefit the most from this deal? And what do you think are the kind of lasting legacies that are going to be when it's all said and done and the next federal election comes around?
Well, my hope from the beginning, when we were first and looking at this idea of how can we force this government to deliver for people, the party that I want to win out of this is people. I want people to win. I want seniors to be able to get their teeth looked after. I want kids to be able to not worry about whether their family or their parents can afford to help them go to the dentist. I've always felt that dental care should be included in our healthcare system. And it was always the intention of Tommy Douglas. And when we started the journey of universal healthcare, it should have always included medication coverage and dental coverage. And that wasn't done in the beginning, and I'm hoping to complete that. So that's what I want to win out of this. I want people to win. I want people to feel that they're getting some relief, some much needed relief. And so whether it's the childcare legislation that we've forced this government to pass, which enshrines the childcare funding permanently and encourages and prioritizes not-for-profit and public childcare, or the dental care, or the paid sick leave that we've won for people at the federal level, or the future wins that we want to have, which is pharmacare and more help to build housing that's more affordable for people. The legacy I want is that New Democrats used our power to help people, and I want people to remember that that's what we do. We use our power to give people a break, to give people support, to lift people up, and that's who I want to win out of this. I want people to win out of this.
It's interesting in asking you to pick winners and losers out of the supply and confidence motion. I should note that nobody can figure out who the winners and losers are. I mean, just, this week, the Hill Times ran a piece where pundits suggested that this is going to elevate the NDP and it will, you'll be earning more traction with voters. My old university chum mate, Warren Kinsella in the Sun newspaper said that they do believe that the Liberals in he believes that the Liberals in the NDP will benefit more, that this deal is going to hurt the Tories, although he did call you guys the axis of weasels, which is so Warren, such a Warren term. But I guess, I totally, I totally hear you when you talk about, the NDP DNA, your fingerprints are going to be on a lot of important social programs and benefits for Canadians. And as they say, no one can take that away from you. But on the other part, at the polls in general elections, your party has been somewhat moribund. And so I guess what I'm wondering is, are you confident that this is a springboard that you can use to get a better result in the general election?
It's hard to say what the outcome is going to be. The one thing I can say concretely that I know is that when we speak to people about their thoughts on New Democrats or me as leader or us as a party, they say, we like what you have to say. We like what your values are. We trust you. And that's reflected in some of the public opinion polling. So that matches up. And the thing that people are reserved about or often have their biggest criticism or concern is that we love your ideas, but we don't think you can achieve them. We don't think they're doable. They sound great, but you can't do them. And now we've shown really concretely that we can get them done. And we got them done while not even being in government. So we campaigned on dental care in 2019, my first campaign as federal leader, campaigned again on it in 2021. And despite not having won, we are delivering. So we can show people that we not only have a good idea, like seniors in our country that have worked their whole lives should be able to get their teeth looked after. That Brenda that I hung out with in Newfoundland and Labrador and St. John's, the city that I spent time as a kid, who has to make a choice between eating or sleeping at night because she's got so much pain in her teeth and she can't afford to get that pain looked at because it costs so much. If she eats dinner, her teeth hurt so much she can't sleep all night. And if she sleeps or she wants to sleep, then she can't eat dinner and then she goes to sleep hungry. That is not something that a senior should have to live with in our country. And I told her that by the end of this year, that will no longer be something you have to worry about. I'm going to make sure that you can get your teeth looked after. So that to me is the concrete thing we can point to, that we promised something and we delivered it. And when Canadians are making their choice in the next election, who they vote for, if they were worried that, well, I like the New Democrats, but I'm not sure they can deliver these things that they promised federally, we can now show that, yeah, we can, and we have. And so maybe that's something that will give Canadians more confidence to vote for us. I want people to know that they can dream bigger, that they can believe better as possible, and that we've delivered that. And people will make that choice in the next election.
So one of the things that I think is interesting, this is just my observation, and I'll be thrilled if you disagree with me. But the confidence of supply or supplying confidence it's risky politics if you're helping to prop up an unpopular government, a government that is clearly the most unpopular party in the land. That would be dangerous. And thankfully, it seems for the NDP, the Conservatives and Pierre Poilievre are making themselves equally unpopular as the government, which leaves you guys in a really good spot, because you're not supporting a government that is so unpopular people want to vote it out of office, and you're not denying an opportunity to a more popular party because the Conservatives are not that. So, would you like to say thanks to Pierre Poilievre right now for creating this sweet spot for the NDP?
Well, it is true that the Conservatives under Pierre Poilievre are not popular. But something funny that people often talk about, how the Prime Minister is not popular, which in certain parts of the country, absolutely true. And then they ignore the fact that also Pierre Poilievre is very unpopular as well. And either way, we're trying to make the case that you don't have to choose between bad and worse, or both bad options. You can choose someone that is actually there for you, fighting for you, lifting you up, bringing things like dental care in, making sure that people have childcare permanently, making sure that people get a break with a GST rebate, that more money in their pocket. So we're hoping that people can see us as a real alternative, that you don't have to plug your nose and vote liberal or be so afraid of the conservatives that you vote liberal, or dislike Trudeau and think, well, I guess the only other option is voting conservatives, who I don't like either. There's another option for you. And I'm hoping to make that case to Canadians that I get that after 10 years, people will be frustrated with the Liberals. I'm frustrated with them. You've got the power to solve the problems that people are facing, and don't take that initiative to solve those problems. And then the Conservatives, their plan really is not surprising, the traditional plan, and openly what Pierre Poilievre is campaigning on, and what he has done in the past, which is to cut things. He wants to cut pensions. He wants to cut investments in social programs, cut healthcare. He wants to cut things, and he's not shy about it. He's saying that's what he wants to do. He wants to cut government spending, which means to cut the investments that people need, cut things like healthcare, pensions, and he's been open about that. So those two options are not your only choices. And I think I'm not thankful, because I wish Canadians had more. I wish that the government was doing more to give people the help they need, but because the government isn't delivering, people are frustrated. And because the Conservatives have really laid out a path that is only going to cause more pain, it bolsters our position. We want to invest in you. We want to lift you up. We want to tackle the fact that billionaires are making more money than ever before while people are struggling to buy the groceries. That's not right. And we're the only ones talking about that. And if that's something that matters to people, they want a society that's more fair, and they want to see our healthcare strong, and they want to see the very richest pay their fair share, so that people aren't being gouged when they go in to buy their gas or buy their groceries. You Democrats are the ones that are going to stick up for you.
It was about 6 years ago when on the federal leader campaign trail there for the NDP, you confronted a heckler. And that was really, I think, the first time for many of us, myself included, that we had sort of seen the way that you deal with rancor and division politically, which is often to appeal to people's reasonability, to be what we might call the politics of positivity in some way, or some kind of way of building a bridge. And I mean, that's kind of been the tone that you've set for the past 6 years, which is very much to be someone working with others. I mean, the supply and confidence agreement is the best example. Now we've got an issue in which, on the foreign electoral interference issue, you're going to need to, in some way, work in consensus with a party that isn't interested in the process, and particularly isn't interested in anything other than really looking at further rancor and division. The first question is, do you think that the politics of consensus building works today? And the second is, on the electoral interference issue, do you think you can work with the Conservatives on trying to find some kind of consensus, even to find out who would be the person to lead an inquiry?
Well, first of all, I appreciate the kind words, Niigaan. I really do believe in doing politics differently, and the supply and confidence agreement is absolutely that. It meant working with someone that I don't agree with a lot, and someone that I've openly campaigned against, and I oppose on a lot of really concrete things. Like, I have a different opinion when it comes to universal public healthcare than the Prime Minister, who's been very two-sided on that point. Campaigned at one, saying that it's bad to have for-profit care, and then when the Premier of Ontario brought in for-profit care, called it innovative. So we disagree very strongly. But I really do believe that the goal of politics should be finding ways to bring people together, working together to deliver results for people and give people the help that they need. So that is something I bring to the table, and I feel a little uncomfortable giving myself a compliment, but that is something. If I have a strength, one of those strengths is that I'm able to put my ego aside, or put maybe the fact that I don't like someone or don't like their views, try to put it aside to find a way to work together. And I believe in that. And I believe that is one of the tasks of how we govern, or how we we lead, we have to find ways to work with people, even if we don't agree with them all the time or often. And so that's something I believe in, and the supply and confidence agreement is actually absolutely evidence of that. And then moving forward with the public inquiry, I was the one that suggested this idea that the process we need to do is one where all parties are in consensus. And I suggested a process that I used when I was a provincial member of parliament in Ontario. And it's a process that is used to select the officers of that parliament. And the process includes every recognized party has one member, and every party has to agree with the selection of the officer. And I use that process to choose the Auditor General of Ontario, who's still currently the Auditor General. And it is a process that works. And so I've put it out there in speaking with the opposition leaders and the Prime Minister that, yes, we should be working together. There is a way to do it. And I'm confident it can be done. And even if there's not a lot of common ground with, for example, me and the Conservatives on really any matter, their position is completely the opposite. They're very much for the billionaires continuing to exploit people. I'm for the working class people. There is still a path for us to work forward, to move forward on something like accountability, because we need to find someone that's independent, someone that has the ability to run a public inquiry, so a judge or a former judge, and someone that has no connection to any of the subject material involved, so that there's no appearance of bias. And there's a way for us to do that, and I can work with all parties to achieve that.
The foreign interference story is it's a difficult one to get your mind around, because because of the mess that the Johnson review has become. I mean, it could have been a lot better, but it didn't turn out to be very good at all. But in your mind, what is the story here? Because I'm wondering why it is that that opposition parties couldn't come to a common understanding or an idea about how an inquiry would proceed. Like where actually would there be points of disagreement? Because isn't the whole point that we all want to know how much foreign governments are interfering in Canadian electoral politics? How can there be disagreement about that? Like, where do you see the more subtle points where there may be disagreement about how to proceed?
Well, there wasn't actually disagreement. If you look at the recent votes, we had 2 votes in Parliament on a public inquiry that we led, that were New Democrat motions, and both votes, the majority of the House voted in favor of a public inquiry. So really, there was no disagreement there. The only party that voted against it was the Liberal Party. So they're the only ones that were offside on this point. They didn't want a public inquiry, while I would say the majority of the Canadians who were paying attention to this issue, and the majority of the other parties outside of the Liberals, all agreed that we needed a public inquiry. So there's agreement there. I think finally the Liberals are starting to signal some openness that they get that that's where we need to go. What it's about to me, what this whole story is about, for New Democrats, our position is it's about restoring confidence in our electoral system. And the reason why that is so important, the story, as we would put it, is because we want more people to vote. And when there is already an apathy out there, where we're seeing less and less people vote, and on top of that, there is this specter or this kind of looming cloud of foreign interference, and people aren't sure what that means, but it just doesn't sound good. It sounds like foreign governments are doing something and messing with our electoral system. That is going to reduce confidence. And for people who think, well, what's the point of voting? It's going to make that question even stronger and say, what's the point of voting? And on top of that, there's other governments messing with our election anyways. So is it even really fair to rid ourselves of any of those doubts that there's no evidence anyways that it impacted the outcome? But still, given what we saw in the States, where a lot of people are questioning the outcome of elections, they're not trusting elections, I really believe it's in our name. We're in the New Democratic Party. I believe in democracy. I believe it's an idea worth fighting for. And one of the ways to make the idea worth fighting for is to give people confidence in the idea, and that you can get out and vote, and that voting does matter. Your vote matters. You should vote. And if I could say, we also have an alignment of our values, believing in democracy, believing in people voting, and it's actually in our own interest. As the voter turnout increases, we actually get more votes. For the other parties, they actually are a little bit the opposite. as voter turnout decreases, the Conservatives actually benefit.
Yeah.
And frankly, the Liberals often benefit from a lower voter turnout as well. We actually benefit from an increased voter turnout, which I guess is very ironically, cosmically in tune with our name and our goal. More people vote, the populace comes out, the real voice of the people come out. And often for New Democrats, that means that more people vote for us. But either way, we believe in encouraging turnout, and that's what our focus is. Believe in the strength of our system by establishing a public inquiry that goes through exactly what happened, what we know, what we're doing about it, what steps are we taking to safeguard our system so that Canadians have confidence.
So, I mean, because the one area, and I don't know if this comes out in negotiations or consultations between opposition parties, but the vision for an inquiry that you've described is probably a little bit different than what Mr. Poilievre wants, which is really the issue for them is liberal cover-up. What are the Liberals covering up? Why are they covering it up? They're covering it up. And, even though I think it's quite inconclusive that the sitting government benefited from the electoral interference, but this idea of the Liberals are letting China help them stay in power. That tone is very different from and focus is different than the tone and focus you just described. Are you concerned that this whole thing could get dragged down into really partisan, toxic bickering and not about the bigger systemic issues?
I'm absolutely worried about that because that is what we're seeing already. The current process we have is one that's driven by the committee, and the committee has really shown the goals of the Conservative is just to burn it all down, to make it about attacking the government and only attacking the government. And that's been pretty evident that that's their goal. And that's why we've been saying from the beginning, this is not working. This partisan focus on something as serious as electoral reform isn't actually doing justice to the question of what's happening in our system and how do we make it better and how do we prevent any of this from happening and how do we let Canadians know exactly what's happening so they understand the scope of it and how do we address it. So that's why we've been saying the independence of a public inquiry will remove that partisanship. We'll take it out of the hands of the Conservatives that want to make it about slinging mud, the Liberals who want to ignore the problem. It'll bring it to our focus, which is let's actually address what the problem is and solve it. So that's the different focus that we're bringing, and the public inquiry will satisfy that. And we've cited the Rouleau Commission or the inquiry into the Emergencies Act as evidence of an inquiry that works. Except for the most extreme critics. Most people look at that inquiry and saw people were cross-examined. There was the independence of a judge making decisions about what information should be kept secret for national security reasons. They were confident in those rulings. And they saw really openly that questions were being asked, that evidence was being challenged. There was a certain rigor and vigor of that process that gave Canadians confidence. Most reasonable people looked at that and thought, okay, I understand what happened with the Emergencies Act, and in that public inquiry, I'm left satisfied with the results. That's what we want to see happen when it comes to political foreign interference. We want to see a process that's similar, that restores confidence, that has that same rigor of a public inquiry where you're seeing questions being asked, you're seeing evidence being challenged. You mentioned one of the questions or concerns around the Johnston report was it lacked that rigor, that idea that evidence would be challenged. It was really often the government would make a statement or a declaration, and then the special rapporteur would just repeat that assertion. And there wasn't that same evidence of testing the evidence or challenging it so that we could get to the truth. That's going to be there in a public inquiry, and it's not going to be able to be governed by the Conservatives because it'll be independent. The inquiry will be run by a judge, and the judge will have that independence, so they're not going to be skewed by one party or another.
After the pandemic, I mean, let's pivot off the electoral interference, although, having been on different shows, that can take up so much airtime. There's other issues that you've been dealing with and that coming out of the pandemic, I think every single Canadian knows that your cost of living has increased, and you just have to go to the gas station, to the bank, to the grocery store. Coming out of the pandemic, the federal government was really quick to tax insurance companies, banks that were all kind of benefiting greatly from issues around the pandemic. And then now there's statistics that have come out to say that the top three grocery chains across the country, Loblaws, Empire, Metro, increased their profits 50%, to the tune of $11 billion, or over hundreds of billions of dollars, in terms of profits. You're arguing for what's often been called a windfall tax, but I think more accurately would be called kind of an equalization, or certainly something around affordability. Why is it that grocery stores seems to be your most interest versus some of the other industries that are out there, is the first part of the question. And then second is, the CEOs of those three corporations have said that's not an accurate figure, $100 billion of profit. What would you say to that?
There's a bunch of things in that question, so let me try to take it apart. One is that we were able to get some movement on the banks and insurance companies. That's actually a part of our agreement, the fact that we should increase taxes on those institutions because they were making huge profits, and we were successful in getting that. To some extent, we would have gone further, but we were able to get that in our agreement, and the government executed that. So that was done. We focused in on groceries because we found that it was something that was becoming very visceral. It was one of the most concrete things that people pointed to as a cost of living increase. That was something that you couldn't avoid. Like, there's other things you can, if the flight tickets go up, you say, okay, well, I'll have to skip a vacation. If the cost of other goods go up, you could say, well, maybe we can tighten our belts a bit and we won't purchase that thing. But with groceries, you don't have a choice. That is something it's a necessity. And what we were finding was there was a level of anger when people were going into the grocery store week after week, and the exact same item that they bought one week, they would go in the next week or a couple of weeks later, and it would be unaffordable. It would be outside of their budget. So they were putting items back that they would normally purchase. They would pick up an item, put it into their cart, and then look at it and say, wait a second, I can't afford this, and take it out of their cart. And that was something new that we're seeing. People were taking items out of their cart, and they were not able to afford the same things they were able to afford before. And it became very visceral because then they started coming out that those very same companies weren't just making their normal high profits. They were making record profits, more money than they've ever made before. And that contrast of something you need, a necessity, and a company making more money than they've ever made before at a time when Canadians are having the hardest time affording it, that contrast is something that did not sit well with people. They were really angry about. And we wanted to capture that legitimate anger, that there's something unfair about that picture, and then say we can do something about it. And the reason why it's so important for us is because we don't believe in just rage farming. We don't want to just inflame angers without giving a solution. And we don't want the anger to be directed in an unjust or unfair way. We want to make it really clear. Yes, these companies are absolutely making record profits. Yes, it is unfair that you're struggling to buy those groceries out of those companies. And there's something we can do about it. Governments should be stepping up and protecting people in the face of this type of exploitation. Other countries around the world have put in a windfall tax. Economists are now saying very clearly, which was once a bit of a contentious point, it's now emerging as more and more of a consensus. Even the IMF, which is not by any means a progressive organization, has admitted that in Europe, they can assess that half of the cost of living increase can be attributed to profits from big corporations. And we're seeing more economists say that profit-driven inflation, or greedflation is the term that we've been using, is a significant driver of the cost of living, unlike the conservatives who point to government spending, which is a very minor increase. The Bank of Canada governor was asked this question. He said, it is not at all the cause of the 8 or 9% inflation we're seeing, or double-digit inflation we're seeing. We can't attribute that to government spending. There's a small portion that will be attributed to government spending, but the significant factors are the war in Ukraine, the COVID supply chain issues that are still ongoing, and Now more economists are pointing to profit-driven inflation as a major driver. So that's why we're focused on it.
If groceries are the attention that you're looking for, grocery corporations, the last question that we have for you is around pharmacare and introducing a pharmacare bill. You've made this the condition of the supply and confidence agreement going forward with the Liberals, that a national pharmacare plan is necessary. Why is it that pharmacare seems to be the hills that you want to die on for this particular issue, but then particularly by entering into this pharmacare bill, I know that it's a part of the conditions of the supply and confidence agreement, but why is it putting so much pressure? Why would you put this much pressure on the Liberal government for this particular issue?
Well, we've laid out 27 items that are all a part of our agreement, and each of those items have to be delivered. So each and every one of those are the conditions of the agreement, and if they don't fulfill them, there'll be repercussions. So those are the things that we force the government to do. Really, those are a list of things the government's supporting us to deliver things for Canadians. And the reason why pharmacare is so important is we've seen a clear decision that this government has made where they have caved to the pharmaceutical industry in a really bad way, in a way that hurts Canadians. Just to make it really clear, there's a body that sets the drug prices in Canada. It's the Patented Medication Review Board. And they requested a number of changes that they need legislatively that would help lower the cost of medication by billions of dollars. It would save Canadians hundreds of dollars. On average, for some families, it would be thousands of dollars of savings. It would significantly lower the cost of medication. And for context, we look to the South and think that our prices are a lot cheaper than America, but Canada is actually the third most expensive country in the world when it comes to medication. Our medications could be much, much more affordable, but they're not. And one of the reasons is this review board, or this regulator that sets the price of medication, said we need to do some changes. And some of the changes are as simple as they requested a new list of countries to compare to when setting our prices, because the current list sets our prices higher because we have the more expensive jurisdictions in our list of countries. Just changing that would immediately help us lower the prices. The government has refused to do that, even though they promised to do it. And then it emerged that the regulator said that the government is not only not supporting these initiatives, they've actually blocked their initiative. It's so bad that a number of the members of this board resigned. The executive director resigned. This is really scathing stuff, that the board members would resign. And they clearly said because the Minister of Health is blocking our attempts to lower the cost of medication for Canadians. And then we dug in deeper, and we found that the pharmaceutical lobby had doubled their visits to the government over the normal period of time. There was around 30. They doubled it to over 60. And right after those lobbying attempts, the government came back with this delaying tactic to not put in place these new changes that would have saved Canadians money. So it became clear to us, here is another example of the government choosing the billionaires over people. And we want to make it really clear that our goal is to force this government to deliver for Canadians. It would save people money. It's a non-inflationary way to save people money. It would improve our healthcare system. It would save everybody at the end of the day. Provinces would save money. People would save money. It's a win-win for everyone. And it's something we fundamentally believe in. Our healthcare system should include medication coverage and dental care coverage the way it always was envisioned to. So it's something really important to me. I believe in healthcare. New Democrats believe in healthcare. And we believe in saving people some money and making our system work better. So that's why we really care about pharmacare.
You know, one of the great byproducts of getting people like you on the podcast is we learn new things all the time. And I'll admit, I did not know there were 27 different conditions on the supply and confidence motion, single motion, 27 different conditions. So my question is, does the NDP lack ambition? You could only come up with 27. I don't know, that seems like a lot. And I mean, like, it's an extraordinary deal, but so maybe I should be saying respect that you got more than 24 individual items in there. Does that reflect the historic nature of the agreement, or the lack? Maybe it would be better to ask about the lack of ambition about the Liberal government and the minority parliament.
Well, I would say if we just got the dental care alone, that would be the biggest expansion of our healthcare system ever in a generation, just the dental care alone. Because if you think about healthcare, our healthcare has only been decreasing over years. Once it came in, there's been erosion of our healthcare. The fact that for the first time ever we're expanding it, think about the history of when dental care or healthcare came in. The fact that this is now the only time that we can say it's being expanded is in and of itself, that one part of the 27 itself is historic.
Yeah.
It's the first time ever we've expanded. So on top of that, we've got 26 other things. I would say this is going to go down as one of the most intense expansions of benefits to Canadians, and something that has never been done before. There's never been an agreement that's done this many things. We've got paid sick days. That was never a part of the law of the land in Canada federally. That is something that we fought for. We got 10 paid sick days. That's a New Democrat condition of our agreement and something that we made happen. The childcare was good. I'll have to admit the government did a good job in negotiating agreements, but there were not really strong conditions, and there's no legislation to make it permanent. Making that legislation a part of our agreement will make it permanent and also prioritize public and not-for-profit spaces. And we all know that if there was no priority on public or not-for-profit, the money would just go to private childcare providers that would end up using that to make more profit and not really benefiting the kids. So that's a significant historic thing. The protection for workers that are coming up, the pharmacare components, the changes that we made to the way we provide funding to companies. We require that they have to have strings attached, that we're not going to give money to companies unless they can guarantee good wages and good salaries. And that's come out in the clean tech investment. So we've done all these changes to a myriad of areas. There's housing initiatives there where you're able to get money for Indigenous communities, for Indigenous, by Indigenous, for communities that live outside of reserves. And this is the majority of Indigenous communities don't live in reserves. And there was no funding specifically allocated to build housing for them. That's another part of our agreement that we're able to achieve. So there's a lot of areas. It covers housing and healthcare. It covers taxation. It covers the ways we invest in jobs. It covers environmental measures. We put in there that there should be an end to fossil fuel subsidies. We've got some of them already ended, more to come. So this is a very ambitious, but it's not New Democrats being in government. So I should end with saying this is the most we could achieve with a liberal government where we are forcing them to do what we need, but it's not by any means enough. And it's not by any means what we would have done if we were in government. It's really given me a taste of what it could be like with a New Democrat in being prime minister of this country. And that's why I've been motivated more than ever before to run to become the next prime minister, because I can see the difference we can make. And we would do a lot more if we were in government.
Well, I'm going to make sure that the headline coming out of the podcast is NDP does not lack in ambition. I think you've convinced me that is that on the ambition side, you guys are just fine.
I hope also people see that there's lots of apathy in government. There's lots of people who sort of feel that government's broken in some way. In fact, that's one of the taglines, I think, in one of the other parties, is that government's broken. But it's evidence here by you just listing off things, and we could go through 27 different steps and sort of do a report card on all 27 for the supply and confidence agreement. But it certainly shows that coalition governments tend to work and they get a lot of things done, whether people want to admit that or not. But the track record suggests that when coalition governments operate, they not only represent more people, but they also seem to have a very heavy, if you look across Europe as well, a very heavy track record, something in which people can make decisions on. And as a result, that's better government overall because there's more things getting done because more people are working together. I guess that's the reality, and I don't know whether certain political areas would want to agree with that or not, but the fact is that there's a lot of things that have gotten done this time around, and maybe more so than in a typical minority parliament.
I would agree, absolutely, and I think that as a country, we should start getting more and more comfortable with the idea that working together is actually a good thing, that we want people to work together. We want people to do that so they can deliver for people, deliver for Canadians. And I don't think there's anything wrong with working together as long as we can achieve things that benefit materially people's lives. And it's something that's very common in Europe. You're absolutely right. So there was a lot of questions or concerns around something that has never been done before. There's never been at the federal level this type of agreement. There's been minority governments. There's been great successes. I would say every major change to our social system, social benefits have come in minority governments where New Democrats push Liberals to bring in things like the healthcare system with Tommy Douglas, old age security and CPP with other New Democrat leaders. These are things that we've achieved through minorities, and now we're trying to do it in a more structured way, given that we don't always trust the government to deliver on things, so we had to get it in writing, and it's been working so far.
It's always we don't have uninteresting conversations on the podcast. We've been very fortunate in the people we've been able to interview, but Jagmeet Singh, we could go on and on. We do appreciate your time, and we also this is further evidence that when offered 30 minutes to do an interview, the Niigaan and the Lone Ranger podcast can turn 30 minutes into 47 minutes with a snap of fingers. So, be warned, press secretaries on Parliament Hill. Like, you'll give us 30, we'll take 47 every time. But seriously, man, like, really appreciate you making time. Like, I know you're working hard. You're out across the country. We always appreciate it when politicians from any party make time to parties take time to talk to us. So, thank you very much for making the time.
Well, thanks for the interest and thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, miigwech for your time.
Miigwech, thank you.
I think that the political sensibilities of our listeners will largely determine how they view some of the things that Jagmeet Singh said to us in the interview. I think there is no doubt that he and the NDP feel good about what they've accomplished. And
laundry list too, right?
Yeah, and a longer list, I think, than a lot of people would give them credit for. I still think one of the interesting things is the battle among the political punditry in the country to figure out whether their deal with the Liberals has been good for the NDP or bad for the NDP. And I pointed out that I think you can pretty much find anybody to take any perspective on this thing. Honestly, I think the only way to tell about whether the deal has been good is to look at the election results in the next federal election.
I've said a number of times that Justin Trudeau is kind of occupying space typically occupied by the NDP. And as a result, that's where he's kind of finding that support to keep himself in power. You're right. I think we'll find out whether we'll really find out tangibly whether Canadians have noticed the role the NDP has played. But my favorite line from our feature interview with Jagmeet Singh is where we tried to get him to say, okay, who's the winner here? And he kept going, oh, the people are the winners. And so
yeah.
We talked about the politics of positivity, and I certainly enjoyed spending that time. And I would like this noted, and feel free to tweet about this, but I think that's the most amount of anyone on the pod who's laughed at your jokes.
Well, I'm not willing to concede that, but like he was a good sport, and for better or for worse, it's difficult for me to get out of any topic without having a little bit of fun with it. And I did present the question humorously, but there is I think the NDP are benefiting from the fact that the deal that they are in with the Liberals might be viewed more cynically by voters if the NDP were helping the Liberals stay in power when there was a definite, decidedly more popular option out there. So if the Conservatives were running at 48% and the Liberals at 23%, but this deal was keeping the Liberals in power, then I think the NDP would they'll get thrashed. Because then it is guilt by association. But as the recent by-election showed, we still don't know. We don't know. A lot of us don't like Justin Trudeau, but on the other hand, that Poilievre guy. There's some rough edges there. And I don't know, maybe we're really just in the beginning of what will turn out to be 20 years of minority governments. Like, it's possible.
Yeah, it's certainly evidence that what we talked about in the pod, which was that coalition governments do work. They may not work for everyone, but they work in particular ways. And when I say not work for everyone, I think it's hard to argue with the track record, but maybe the directions of that track record people might take issue with. But this is our last pod till the fall. Now that's a single tear.
Yeah,
I see that's a single tear coming down your cheek right now.
yeah. Well, it's a lot of work. I mean, don't get me wrong. What has two thumbs and, completely underestimated the amount of work it takes to put a podcast together? This guy. And, and it would have been way harder if we didn't have, the help from CJNU and Adam Glynn. I mean, Adam, thump, chest thump, brother, Adam. Thank you,
Adam
brother, for helping.
And Adam really has donated so much time to make it sound great. And so this is where we send a big, huge miigwech and kudos over to Adam, who's actually listening right now and editing as we speak, literally. And all of our great colleagues at the Winnipeg Free Press, which we have to keep calling the Free Press now. So we have to remind ourselves to keep calling it that. And editor Paul Simin and Wendy Swatsky, who uploads our pod, and everybody over there that really does great work. And our guest hosts who came and joined with us this year, Jenny Surratt. Yeah. We had a whole bunch.
Do you call her Jenny?
Oh, sorry.
No. But I'm going to check with her to see if Jenny's okay. But because I like Jenny.
As we talked about on that episode, or perhaps as we talked about in the past, was I knew her when she was in high school. I was her high school teacher. So I did call her Jenny in those days. So that's really where that comes from. But yes, I apologize, Jen Zarati, for calling you Jenny.
Yeah. Well, but I've got her number, and I can, I believe it's 867-5309.
All right. Well, before I get in deeper trouble, I will miss seeing you every week.
Okay.
Probably crash your backyard at some point.
I think there's some deliberations that need to be conducted in the backyard around my
debriefing,
my allegedly, purportedly smokeless fire pit. And we'll talk more about that in the fall when it's more fire weather. But I mean, it really doesn't seem to be the time to be having fires in the backyard right now.
Not a great. It's too soon.
So thanks. 24 episodes, I believe.
That's a pretty good first season.
Yeah, I think we rounded at 24 episodes, and certainly the fall will be busy. Certainly once a week in the fall. Leading up to the election campaign, and then interesting debriefs. And I'm hoping that once the campaign starts, and we are once again the best friend to all political leaders, they'll love us again in the fall, so we can get the premier and other important people on the podcast.
I will see you soon down the trail there, Lone Ranger.
Happy trails to you.